Oral questions by members.
Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This government has failed to deliver a plan for BC's future. The NDP delivered a budget which, quite frankly, is just devastating for the people in this province. It's hard to imagine people struggling today with affordability are now going to be facing a 20% increase in the carbon tax in April 1. 20% increase. That's not just for the individual struggling, that's for all businesses. This government hikes taxes, they're wasting money, and they're leaving British Columbians with nothing but debt. To the Premier, through you, Mr. Speaker, will this government halt the 20% increase on the carbon tax? I know they won't eliminate it because they don't have the courage for that, but will they at least halt this carbon tax increase so that we can give the people in the province the break that they need?
Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the member opposite knows, the federal government introduced a national carbon tax in 2019 and sets the carbon tax rate. We've said it before, if Ottawa removes their requirement for the carbon tax, we will remove carbon tax on British Columbians while ensuring that big polluters pay. The member forgets to mention, of course, that this is a federally required government carbon tax. And the money that comes in from the carbon tax is in fact dispersed, all of it dispersed to British Columbians.
Leader of the Official Opposition, supplemental.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, that shows the backbone that this government does not have in taking the right steps to protect British Columbians and put money in their pocket, just like their promise for a $1,000 rebate immediately for people in this province that are struggling to put food on the table, and that it would be permanent in the budget. Permanent to have that kind of a tax relief. And yet they refuse to stand up on things like carbon tax. So let me maybe ask this question then of the Premier. You've accepted the idea of a carbon tax on thermal coal coming from the US. You've dealt with the carbon tax problem on the biodiesel so that we can protect the jobs up in the north. You say you're going to do that. So will this Premier, through you, Mr. Speaker, today call the bill that I just introduced, the Free Trade and Mobility Act in Canada, to make sure that we bring down our barriers in this province with other provinces so that we get free trade happening in this country?
Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, the member opposite knows that part of our response to these unjustified tariffs is to work diligently on bringing down the barriers between our provinces. Minister of Jobs, Economic Development and Innovation has been doing this work. We've already identified 2 things that we're removing our exemptions. We're going to continue this important work because, Honourable Speaker, we have opportunity to grow our economy not only in looking at diversifying trade to the east, but diversifying trade to the west, and that work is going on.
Leader of the Official Opposition, second supplemental.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, call me a little underwhelmed, given the fact that Nova Scotia brought this bill in. It's the same bill. It's a simple reciprocal bill to bring down barriers if other provinces do. It's the right thing to do for British Columbians. Well, let me ask, Mr. Speaker, let me ask another simple question. If this trade war accelerates and the Americans stop taking our patients, what is this government's plan for dealing with the healthcare crisis that we have, for making sure that our cancer patients are going to be able to receive care if they can't be sent south of the border?
Yes. Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I appreciate the question from the member opposite because he allows me the opportunity to again reiterate the importance of protecting services for British Columbians, which is what our budget does, Honourable Speaker. We are continuing to move forward
Minister.
Honourable Speaker, we are continuing to support healthcare in British Columbia. We are attaching more people than ever to primary care doctors. 600 people a day, Honourable Speaker.
Members. You're wasting your own time. Minister will conclude.
Honourable Speaker, this budget protects healthcare for British Columbians. It adds $4.6 billion over the fiscal plan to continue to grow our healthcare system. This is things like building the hospitals that people need in places like Terrace, which just opened last month, Honourable Speaker. We will continue to support British Columbians to make sure that they have access to healthcare when they need it and where they need it, Honourable Speaker, not selling off hospital lands as the member opposite did.
Member for Abbotsford South.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. You know, this government has failed to deliver on critical infrastructure projects either on time or on budget again and again and again. Highway 1 is BC's #1 highway, and it's the most important trade corridor in the Fraser Valley, if not in British Columbia. In spite of a budget, and talking about it in the budget, this government announced $0 new to upgrade Highway #1. This Premier is inept at getting things built. Current infrastructure projects are $15 billion over budget and way past their deadlines. Mr. Speaker, through to the Premier. Can this Premier please explain to truckers and the public why he has failed to build anything on time or on budget?
Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, this budget commits more capital than ever before. $15 billion each year over the fiscal plan is more than $45 billion for capital projects. $45 billion. It's about building British Columbia. This budget is so focused on that, Honourable Speaker, and creating 180,000 jobs while we do it, Honourable Speaker. This critical infrastructure is important to the truckers that were mentioned opposite. Honourable Speaker, we know that having investments in infrastructure, in bridges and in highways is crucial not only to getting people where they need to go, but to keeping our supply chain moving. It's important to businesses as well, Honourable Speaker.
Member supplemental.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. You know, in spite of all the flowery words, this government has failed to cultivate our agricultural industry. In 2024, we saw over 7,000 farm workers lose their jobs, and then the NDP cut the agricultural ministry by $86 million in this budget. We Conservatives promised to double agriculture production, but this Premier wants to cut ag production in half. The Premier talks a big game about the importance of food security, but that's all it is talk. What is his solution to cut the agricultural budget, and how can the agricultural minister justify cuts to her budget at such a crucial time when we are threatened with USA tariffs?
Minister of Finance.
Well, it seems appropriate that this member is asking about agriculture. He can't resist shoveling manure, Honourable Speaker. Let me be very clear. Member, let me be very clear. Let's see if you can take this in. There is no cut to the Ministry of Food and Agriculture budget, Honourable Speaker. Not true. Not true.
Members,
Oh, believe me, I know the budget. Honourable Speaker, there is...
Member.
Honourable Speaker, there was close to $100 million the prior year that had been accessed by the people in agriculture which was available to them because of challenges that they had due to climate change, Honourable Speaker. That would be available to them again should they need it. That is not a $100 million cut to agriculture, Honourable Speaker. In fact, the Ministry of Food and Agriculture budget is increased in this budget from $130 million to $143 million. May I also add that the 2024-25 forecast includes an additional one-time amount of $99 million for insurance claims should they be needed.
House Leader of the Third Party.
Honourable Speaker, in response to tariff threats, this government has promised a wave of new mines, fossil fuel infrastructure and clean energy projects, all with faster review processes. The government is assuring British Columbians that accelerated environmental assessment processes will be just as rigorous, that Indigenous rights will be respected and the public will be engaged. Yet the budget for the Ministry of Environment and Parks decreased from $225 million last year to $221 million per year. And the budget of the Ministry of Water, Land and Resource Stewardship increases very slightly to from $219 million to $221 million. Where are the resources for these accelerated approvals? My question through you, Honourable Speaker, is to the Premier. How does his government plan to deliver both rigorous assessments for this massive increase in projects and at the same time accelerated process with a decreased budget? Thank you.
Minister of Finance.
Honourable Speaker, thank you to the colleague opposite for the question. I will provide a bit of a correction, if I may, which is that the budget for the Ministry of Environment saw an increase of $4 million over last year's budget, Honourable Member. And I will share with the member opposite that while it is true that we're very focused on accelerating projects that can help us grow our GDP during this time of significant economic threat, we will continue to prioritize the environment and working closely with Indigenous partners. It's so integral. It's absolutely integral, member. And I do want to share with you that there's been a number of validator quotes that have come in regards to this budget, and perhaps I could share with you that Alexa Young from New Economy Canada, the Vice President there, says that today's budget stays the course with its focus on delivering the services British Columbians rely on, while also reaffirming earlier commitments to getting things built, including an important focus on critical mines, clean energy projects, and electricity transmission infrastructure.
Member supplemental.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. The Premier of this province made a solemn commitment to future generations to protect 30% of land and water by 2030. We are currently at only 19%. We still have a long way to go. Yet there doesn't appear to be any funding in this year's budget to increase the amount of conserved lands in BC. The same is true for the long-promised biodiversity and ecosystem health framework. It's absent from this budget. This seems to be a pattern for this government. The promises are made, but where's the funding to secure them? We are still in the midst of a climate and biodiversity crisis. We cannot rely on contingency funds to secure a livable future. My question is to the Premier, where in Budget 2025 is there adequate funding to support the province's stated goals on conservation?
Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much, Honourable Speaker. Our work on climate action remains core, and we're absolutely devoted to building a sustainable future together. Protecting our environment is essential for supporting healthy communities, ensuring a prosperous economy, and protecting against climate change. About 18.5 million hectares of protected and conserved areas in BC have already been protected, Mr. Speaker, which is nearly 20% of BC's total land area. The Minister of Water, Land and Resource Stewardship has a clear mandate to protect 30% of lands and waters by 2030, and we're going to keep doing that work together.
Member for Skeena.
Mr. Speaker, this government has failed to address BC's overdose crisis. They made no mention, none, of fentanyl, no mention of opioids, not a single mention of overdoses in their budget that was presented yesterday. And if you don't believe me, go do a word search of this budget right now. Not one word. Not only did this government not fund any new treatment and recovery beds, they announced no plan for involuntary care. On October 29th, this Premier said that he was committed to bringing in involuntary care. So, Mr. Speaker, through you, why has this government abandoned its promise to bring in involuntary care for those in need?
Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much, Honourable Speaker. This budget is very much focused on protecting health of British Columbians and continuing the important work in regards to mental health. There's $500 million put forward in that work. I want the member opposite to know that there is money that is moving forward already in the system to continue to expand vital treatment centre and treatment care. We'll continue to expand the work that we're doing with Foundry centres, the work on Road to Recovery and beyond. It's vital work, and we're continuing that work. I do want to share also a quote with the member opposite. The quote is from Johnny Morris, who's the CEO of the Mental Health Association. Grateful to see that language to sustain and support services. We often see in situations like this that we see some of the first services to go are mental health and addiction services. So we're reassured to see this commitment.
Member for Skeena supplemental.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With all due respect, I believe it's page 7 of the budget, if memory serves. It says right in there that that $500 million is going towards continuing to support existing beds. There's no mention of new beds in there. This government's failed to plan a way out of the mess that they have created, but don't bother asking them about their plan to fight the overdose crisis either. It's simple, it's not to talk about it. No mention in the budget. After 9 budgets, why does this Premier continue to let people die in the street instead of fund treatment and recovery?
Minister of Finance.
To the member opposite, through you, Honourable Speaker, I'm happy to talk about it because we do continue these investments. And as I've said in previous budgets, for example, $1 billion in 2023 earmarked to mental health. We are growing out this program. We are growing it out, Honourable Speaker. For example, when we first started this work, there was 1 foundry. Now there are 15, in addition to an online foundry available for people where there isn't a foundry in their community, and there are more coming. This is very, very important work, and we'll continue to do it.
Member for Surrey Cloverdale.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Last night, a VPD officer on patrol on the downtown east side was slashed with a weapon several times and injured. And only last week, Mr. Speaker, an officer in Surrey was attacked by a suspect who choked them, tried to take their gun. Both suspects have a history of violence. The man who choked the officer in Surrey was the subject of a release order when he performed that attack. Police leaders in Vancouver have told me that on average, one of their officers is injured by a violent suspect every 3 days. We need justice reform to protect communities and the police who serve them. When will the Premier take public safety seriously and lock dangerous people up?
Minister of Finance.
Much, Honourable Speaker, and thank you to the member opposite to speak about what exists for public safety measures inside of our budget, which, may I point out, is a lot. Honourable Speaker, one of the most important things you'll find in the budget is a commitment to expand the training available for new police officers through the Justice Institute of British Columbia. Police.
Member. Member?
To the member opposite, we do agree. Police are doing their job, and we need more of them to continue that important work, Honourable Speaker. And we'll also be introducing a pilot program that will be helpful to small businesses, Honourable Speaker, and something that I think is deeply important, which is assisting with the challenge of small crimes that add up for small businesses and make it difficult for them to continue their work. And that is going to be focused on shoplifting and vandalism. The member opposite might also be interested in knowing that we're moving forward with secure care, Honourable Speaker. Secure care is so important. There are many different experiences that people on the street have. There is a small number of people who really need to be in secure care, Honourable Speaker. We're moving forward with that. We've got 2 secure care facilities that will be opening this spring, and there's more money in the budget for this work to continue.
Member supplemental?
Thank you, Speaker. The Premier's taxpayer-funded safe supply is fueling the fentanyl trade, and it's enriching drug traffickers. His decriminalization experiment handcuffed the police. It took away their enforcement powers for 15 months. So it should be no surprise, Mr. Speaker, that a recent Criminal Intelligence Service Canada report said gangs and cartels that make fentanyl operate mostly in British Columbia and Ontario. So we're tied for being the worst in manufacturing deadly fentanyl. This, Mr. Speaker, is not the kind of Buy BC campaign that our province should be known for. Mr. Speaker, with a fentanyl crisis that is killing 6 people every day in our province, why didn't the Premier announce any new funding specifically tied to fighting fentanyl production and trafficking in the 2025 budget?
Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. In addition to the public safety items that I mentioned previously when speaking, Honourable Speaker, Budget 2025 provides $67 million to improve community safety, increasing funding for coordinated response teams through the Repeat Violent Offending Intervention Initiative and Special Investigation and Targeted Enforcement, Honourable Speaker. These are very important tools. They do the way that they work is they bring together probation officers, police officers, and they make sure that there's a coordinated effort to ensure that people who have this behaviour are either getting the support that they need or are in jail, Honourable Speaker.
Member for Surrey White Rock.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the spirit of never letting a crisis go by without taking advantage of it, the Premier did just that. How did he do it? He doubled his budget. He doubled his budget. So what does that mean? That means double the spin doctors, means double the comms officers, means double everything in the Premier's office. How did he do it? He did it at the expense of his own ministers. So reducing the budgets in the Ministry of Agriculture, the Ministry of Environment, and by the way, if you go to page 22 in the book, you clearly see a reduction of $4 million in the Ministry of Environment's operating budget. That's right there in the book if the minister finds the time to look through it. So with that, how does this Premier justify those cuts at the expense of bloating his own personal office?
Minister of Finance. Member. Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much, Honourable Speaker. As the member opposite knows, we have put in a hiring freeze, and the way that it works is we make exemptions. We make exemptions. Mr. Speaker, we make exemptions for filling vacancies that are either core services or deeply required for that work to move forward. There are some vacancies that we are not filling, and there's some vacancies that we are.
Members.
The
Member
truth
for
of the
Abbotsford South. Please continue. Minister will continue.
The truth of the matter is, leading up to the election, there were a number of people in GCPE who stepped back from that work. We knew that that shop was not going to be as busy. This is actually good news because it saves us money, Honourable Speaker. But those roles have to be filled. It's important work, Honourable Speaker. In regards to the Premier's office, since the election, we've had a number of staff changes. Some people have left, and others have moved into positions to support government priorities. Mr. Speaker, you will see in this budget that the public service line, the FTE increase is going to be zero. It's going to be zero, Honourable Speaker.
Member for White Rock supplemental.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In this question period, we are giving a new definition to NDP math. I can, for the life of me, not understand how the Minister of Finance and the Premier can say that they're not increasing. The Premier has doubled his own budget at the expense of his various ministers, right? And we talk about the fact, we talk about people in the Premier's office. The first thing this Premier did after the election is give a $300,000 severance package to his top advisor. That's the priority. So again, the Minister of Finance stands in this House and says no cuts. If she checks her own budget on page 22, you see a $4 million cut, again, page 22, to the Ministry of Environment. Again, we have seen the Premier's office double. How does the Premier justify these cuts and the expansion of his own personal office?
Minister of Finance.
Honourable Speaker, it is not true that there is a cut to the Ministry of Environment. There are...
Members.
There have been changes made to that ministry in dividing it. I'm happy to meet with the member opposite and walk them through those changes. There is no cut to the Ministry of Environment, Honourable Speaker, but I do have to point out how unbelievably rich this line of questioning is, coming from a team of people who are double-dipping people sitting on this team, getting paid twice by taxpayers, twice, Honourable Speaker.
Member for Kamloops Centre.
Mr. Speaker, the Finance Minister just said that there will be no new hires in this year's budget. Can the Minister confirm then that the budget book that says they're going from 520,000 public service compensated members to 593,000 public service compensated members in this year's budget is on hold and those 73,000 hires are no longer happening?
Minister.
Honourable Speaker, the FTE growth over this fiscal plan will be zero. There will be people who come and people who go, but this FTE growth over the fiscal plan in our public service will be zero.
Member supplemental. Mr. Speaker, let's be clear. This government said they were only going to hire 500 people last year. Then they hired 2,000 and said, oh, now we're going to freeze it. And now they're telling us they're going to freeze that. That's one component. And directly below that in the budget, it says public service compensated employees are going from 520,000 to 593,000 in this year. Those are still paid for by taxpayers as well. I don't think the average person would consider that to be a hiring freeze. I don't know. That's just me, perhaps. But, Mr. Speaker, let's look at some other reviews of this budget. The BC Chamber says it doesn't deliver. BC, missed opportunity. BCTF says, well, it's met contractual obligations. The Pemba Institute, missed opportunity. AME does not provide additional resourcing to support permitting or consultation with First Nations. And COFI, who's been under attack for softwood for 8 years with no action from this government, says it's disappointed about lack of forestry support. Now, the minister goes on about support for DigiBC, which is wonderful. They've been lobbying this government since 2018. They've never actually got that in. They've never been able to get to that 25% tax credit. Since 2018, this government has refused to do that. You know what has changed? The person lobbying for DigiBC in 2018 is the now Minister of Finance. So could the Minister of Finance tell us, why the only people out there that seem to get preference for tax relief in this budget, not the forest sector, not mining, certainly not small business, is the agency she used to lobby for, yet was rejected by this government until she became the finance minister.
Members, come to order. Members, that's enough. Come to order. Member, Government House Leader.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Today, our Finance Minister has been answering questions on a budget that's designed to get us through the tariffs, the most grave threat, the most grave threat that this province faces. The Premier gave a statement on the importance of our province being ready and prepared. The Leader of the Opposition got up and said some words about standing up for Canada. Well, it's important that we all stand up for Canada. And I'm a firm believer, Honourable Speaker, that when you wear the hat, you support the team. And so when we hear from a Leader of the Opposition, when we hear...
Members.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. So I won't address all the issues I have with the opposition when it comes to those on his side who want to wear a MAGA hat. But I do have a question for the Leader of the Opposition, Honourable Speaker. Does he think it's appropriate, Honourable Speaker? Does he think it's appropriate that a member of his caucus stands up in this House today and introduces someone known as Mr. Sunshine Baby, seated in the gallery? And I'll tell you what it has to do, Honourable Speaker, because yesterday the person that introduced by this caucus, Honourable Speaker, posted a video that said, "The fat pig Doug Ford in Ontario is ready to cut off the power and Liberals are cheering him on." This is quite literally, by definition, an act of war. Honourable Speaker, does the Leader of the Opposition think it's appropriate for a member of his caucus to introduce somebody like that when